Shall we start?
Yeah, sure.
Yes.
Good evening all, and welcome to this PIC program, which is a webinar on science for society. This is Dr. Sangeeta Kale, working as a programs committee member of PIC, and I also work as the professor in physics at the Defense Institute of Advanced Technology. I'll quickly tell about PIC. As you all know, Pune International Center, it's a think tank of Pune comprising of more than 300 members from various walks of life in and around Pune. We can see the details of PIC at the website of puneinternationalcenter.org. Various programs and activities are conducted under this umbrella of PIC, such as talks, seminars, discussion forums, policy paper writings, conferences involving youth and young minds within the country and also around the globe. There are various activities under PIC, such as social innovation, energy, environment, science and technology, policy research, national security, PIC Adda, dialogues with ambassadors, and so on and so forth. So today, for today's webinar, we have none other than Dr. R.A. Mashelkar as the chairman for this session. Dr. Arvind Chinchure, who is the founder and CEO of QLEAP Academy, is going to moderate this event. And we have an excellent talk today on science to fight COVID-19 and cancer perspectives from Pune by Professor L.S. Shashidhara. Professor L.S. Shashidhara is a distinguished professor and dean research at Ashoka University, professor of biology at ICER Pune, and principal co-investigator at PKC, that is Pune Knowledge Cluster, and founder member of Indian Cancer Genome Atlas, ICGA. Professor Shashidhara specializes in genetics, molecular biology, and evolutionary biology. His group has identified key mechanisms that specify organ development and regulate growth control during embryonic development. They also have expanded their studies to examine the status of these evolutionary conserved mechanisms in epithelial cancers in humans. Professor Shashidhara has served in past as Vice President of INSA, that is Indian National Science Academy, and Secretary General of International Union of Biological Sciences. He is currently the President of IUBS. For his contribution to basic and applied biology, Professor Shashidhara is recognized with CSIR, Technology and SS Bhatnagar Prizes and JC Bose National Research Fellowship. In 2018, Professor Shashidhara was elected as Associate Member of European Molecular Biology Organization, and currently he has served and is serving as chair, co-chair of various apex committees of Government of India and Science and Technology Organization, and is active in teachers training and capacity building. We welcome you, sir, for this talk. The chairman of today's event, Dr. R.A. Mashelkar, needs no introduction. All of us know him so very well. However, I shall briefly go through his profile. Dr. R.A. Mashelkar, National Research Professor, was the longest serving Director General of Council of Scientific and Industrial Research, CSIR, and also Chairman of National Innovation Foundation from 2000 to 2018. He was the President of Indian National Science Academy from 2004 to 2006, as also the President of Global Research Alliance 2007 to 2018. 44 universities from around the world have honored him with honorary doctorates, which include universities of London, Salford, Pretoria, Wisconsin, Swinburne, Monash, and Delhi University. Dr. Mashelkar has many firsts to his credit. He was the first Indian to win the most prestigious TWAS Lenovo Science Prize in 2018, which is considered as mini Nobel Prize for developing world scientists. First Indian from India to be elected as Fellow of US National Academy of Inventors in 2017. First Asian scientist to win the Business Week USA Award of Stars of India at the hands of George Bush Sr., the former President of USA, and the first and the only scientist to win the JRD Tata Corporate Leadership Award in 1998 so far. He is the only third Indian engineer to have been elected as a Fellow of Royal Society since 1660, seventh Indian scientist to have been elected as Foreign Fellow of US National Academy of Science since 1863, and seventh Indian to have been elected as Foreign Associate of American Academy of Arts and Science since 1780. There is another proud first to his credit. He has brought awareness about importance of protection of Indian traditional knowledge. He fought the various battles on wrong US patents that were granted to turmeric and basmati rice. As a chairman of standing committee in World's Intellectual Property Organization, he championed amongst the 176 member nations the cause of introducing traditional knowledge as a form of knowledge that was on par with formal scientific knowledge in patent search systems by introducing a new traditional knowledge resource classification. This led to the creation of first traditional knowledge digital library of around 300 million pages that all the patent offices are mandated to search before granting a patent based on traditional knowledge. This is a landmark initiative has helped in preventing to a large extent the misappropriation of traditional knowledge. Dr. Masharkar has been on the board of directors of India's most reputed companies, which include Reliance Industries Limited, to Tata Motors Limited, to Hindustan Unilever Limited, and so on. In the post-liberalized India, Dr. Masharkar has played a critical role in shaping India's science, technology, and innovation policies. He was a member of Scientific Advisory Council, the Prime Minister, set up by successive governments for 30 years. The President of India honored Dr. Masharkar with Padma Shri in 1991, with Padma Bhushan in 2000, and with Padma Vibhushan in 2014, which are the three of the highest civilian awards. We are indeed honored to have you, sir, as a President of PIC and Chairman for this event. I now request Dr. Masharkar, sir, to give his welcome address, and I also request Mr. Arvind Chinchure for further to moderate this event. Over to Masharkar, sir, please.
Thank you very much. Indeed, our beloved Vice President, Dr. Vijay Kelkar, Professor Shashidhara, Dr. Arvind Chinchure, my friends. I'll be very brief. I think one thing I've realized is that my CV, I should reduce it to some 5-6 lines so that we can give maximum time for why we are here. You are not here to listen to my...
Sir, you have achieved so much that we have to go through it, sir.
That's all right. I was saying it on the lighter side. We are here to listen to Shashi. So I will also not speak sort of for too long. Just take 3 or 4 minutes. I think first of all, Shashi, thank you very much for doing us the honor. I have looked at Shashi not only as a great scientist, but as a great science leader, and a great science leader with social conscience. I mean, we know about his pioneering work in genetics, molecular biology, evolutionary biology. But what is most important is that in terms of his science leadership, to be the first president, first Indian to be the president of International Union of Biological Sciences in 100 years, I think is something very special. You have done us really, really proud, Shashi. As far as the topic of the day is concerned, I mean, to say that it is topical will be an understatement. All of us have seen the devastation that has been caused by the pandemic. And science, of course, is the savior for us.
Correct.
Yeah. So science is the savior for us is obvious. In fact, when somebody said 2020 is the year of pandemic, that is how it will go down in the history, I corrected him by saying that it will also go down as the year of science. Because what the scientists have been able to do during that year is absolutely incredible in terms of, for example, getting the mRNA vaccine within an year, I think was an absolutely incredible feat. However, although science has triumphed, the lack of scientific temper has created the havoc that we see here. we all understand from the experts that the bottom line in winning the war is COVID acceptable or COVID appropriate behavior. But COVID appropriate behavior requires scientific temper, wearing masks, keeping social distance, and so on and so forth. And the huge havoc that has been caused is not just because the new variant that we have is far more virulent, but I would put it simply that it is not, it is just the behavior of the virus as well as behavior of people. And the behavior of virus also changes with behavior of people, because when it gets transmitted, it gets mutated. And therefore, we will have to look at this problem in a sort of composite sense. There are bigger issues connected with, so although we say science for society, science can be used for society, provided certain fundamentals, including scientific temper, are obeyed. And the last point I want to make is that, as Dr. Vijay Karkar told me on the other day, we talk about Satyameva Jayate, truth alone will triumph, and science is the truth. Of course, there is nothing like an ultimate truth, but science is the truth. And therefore, getting wedded to that becomes very critical. And therefore, looking at data-based evidence, and then evidence-based policy, not policy-based evidence, but evidence-based policy becomes extremely critical. And that is why I feel that Shashi, your lecture is very, very important today. We have the Pune Knowledge Cluster, where you are leading with my friend Ajit Kembavi. You are doing a fantastic job. Pune has to be not only the action leader, but the thought leader. And I'm very happy that we are going to focus on that. So with these few words, I'd like to welcome you once again, Shashi, and over to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So Arvind, should I start or?
Just, Professor Shashi, there are 1 minute. So we touched almost, we are touching almost 170 participants, and there is a large contingent participating from Bangladesh. So I thought I must welcome our special friends from Bangladesh for joining this particular session. Of course, they are also your collaborator, Professor Shashi. So knowing you and your work, I'm sure that it is going to be a big revelation for us, and it's a great learning for us, how to apply science and science to deal with this one side pandemic, other side is epidemic like cancer. Over to you, Professor Shashi.
Thank you. Thank you. First, thank you, Dr. Mashelkar. I'm really honored to present in front of you. In fact, I'm almost feeling like, I'm giving a small examination, an oral examination in front of you, because whatever I'm going to talk, it's almost, you always talk about these things. In fact, most of the sentences and words I'm going to use are all coming from your own, earlier talks and books. In fact, just to mention, most of what I'm going to talk about, it's not going to be my own research work or my lab. It's mostly where I'm involved in as a coordinator, as a facilitator, many times as an observer rather than a player. This is a talk about how one could actually use science to address a societal problem, particularly health related. So in a way, I'm not going to use my own personal examples, but I want to give some personal touch to this, because why and how I got involved in this. In fact, again, is a parallel to Dr. Mashelkar. The day he became DG, or the month he became DG, I joined CCMB as a scientist. My independent research career started in the same month. It's coincidence, not a pleasant coincidence, perhaps. The day he stepped down as DG CSR, I moved to Pune, to ISA Pune. So in a way, my entire period in CSR was your DG ship. And that's where you started Nimitli program. And that Nimitli program where, you sort of had more confidence among younger people. And you made me a coordinator of one of the Nimitli projects, which basically was close to about 30 crore rupees on those days in early 2000. And today's, I don't know how much it would be. And someone who was just a scientist, E1 on those days, coordinating a 30 crore project with involving 6 or 7 institutes, gave me a lot of experience. So that actually helped a lot after I came to Pune in coordinating a variety of different types of projects. Okay, so quickly, let me start sharing. So the lecture series or webinar series of Pune International Center is Science for Society. And society will have a large number of problems: health, air, water, so, sustainability, poverty, and kind of problems. So today I'm going to mostly focus on health-related problem because I have some understanding of health-related problem being a biologist. But problems of society are plenty, and how to address these kind of problems using science is the topic which I think all of the time everybody is talking about. Right. And as you all know, all problems are complex. That's why they are problems. Otherwise, wouldn't call them as problems. And societal problems are extremely complex, is because it's multifactorial and many times it's unpredictable. In fact, people talk about that monsoon prediction is one of the most complex science problems in science. Is simply because it's multifactorial and yeah, maximum perhaps you can predict 2 weeks in advance or 1 month in advance, but it is still unpredictable in the longer run. And most societal problems are even more unpredictable because of the human, behavior around it. So that's one of the reasons why we need to use a completely different strategy to address societal problems. And thankfully, the data-driven approaches and new data analytics are actually helping even to address as complex problem as the traffic, poverty, infectious diseases, or even wars, conflict resolution. So I have sort of prepared this talk, Dr. Mashelkar, thinking that there are a large number of students are also general public, those who are scientists, the practitioner of science, to be very basic, particularly the first 2-3 slides. So please bear with me. People always give this analogy that, understanding the world, understanding the reality, it's like, blind men, sort of trying to understand an elephant. So if you want to make it an analogy even more complex, what if this, elephant is moving? What if this elephant is running? How do these blind men even understand a moving or a running elephant rather than simply a standing elephant, which we normally always refer to as a metaphor, right? So this is where the science helps. So one of the ways, if you look at, how to understand the truth or, being more objective, people always say that, if I observe something, why don't you verify your observation whether other people also observe the same thing, right? You go on trying to ask people. Let's say it's this movement of the planets around the sun, which is what we know today. But if you ask, let's say, 500 years ago, if you had asked those days, I don't know how many people live on Earth, every one of them would have said that it's the sun which moves around us, sun rises from the east and then sets in the west, right? Even today, anybody you ask, 7 billion people, no one has a direct knowledge of movement of Earth around the sun. It's only based on the textbook, and because it's already been sort of known to people through the science, and they have accepted it as truth, not necessarily because of their own self-realization. That's simply because our sensory perception is limited to understand the reality of the natural world, right? How much distance we can perceive, what smallest size we can see, what time scale we can resolve. And anything faster than 100 milliseconds is almost impossible for us to resolve. With certain colors we cannot see, or in fact most colors we don't see. So our sensory perception is so limited. Even if you had asked, we wanted to be unbiased and very objective, and let's say 7 billion people are going to express an opinion about coronavirus, it could be false. It's simply because the world could be completely different. And this is what the science helps us to understand. It's trying to help us to understand not only an unbiased and objective way to understand the world, not only natural world, also the human world. It actually tries to provide an understanding of the world which is beyond our own sensory perception. That's more important. Now, it adheres to systematic method of collecting evidence and validation hypothesis. Now, trying to understand a complex problem and trying to solve that problem, of course, there are many steps, and we have to go systematically. Irrespective of whether it is a pandemic's time or is a normal time, we cannot violate the methods of science. You can fast track certain things by collaboration and cooperation across the world, but we should not violate any of the steps of scientific methods. If you violate those methods, invariably will not be able to understand the cause and effect of a problem, and at the same time will not be able to identify a sustainable solution. So these are the steps. I'm not going to read through all of these things. So, the application of knowledge for societal good has to be it will be, essential in interdisciplinary exercise. It involves large number of teams with diverse expertise. First of all, trying to understand what is society, why certain issues are haunting the society, whether it's a traffic problem, whether it's a poverty problem, whether it is the pollution related. We may think that water is something nothing to do with the living system, but the pollution, water, availability of water, even the flow of water could largely be affected because of the human activities. So one has to understand the society using a multidisciplinary approach. And for this, we need large number of scientists have to come together. And that's the essence of modern science. So coming to two specific examples I'll take. The reason I have taken these two examples are because these are the two examples in which I have direct knowledge and personal involvement. The second is also that this is the Pune International Center, which is organizing this webinar. I'm trying to give a perspective from Pune. I thought there are two projects in which Pune has led and has made certain impact, not only at the Pune level, it's also the national level and to some extent international level. That's why I've chosen these two specific ones. Of course, these are all my personal choice of topics. Pune has contributed much more than what I'm talking today. So this is, just a sort of a case studies, you can say, about what Pune has contributed to scientific world and to the society at large using the science and technology. So understanding the cancer, obviously there is two aspects to it. One is the purely from biological perspective, how you basically understand this cancer. Certain proteins are upregulated or certain other proteins are downregulated, and a combination of these two will make cells extremely proliferative, uncontrolled growth. But as soon as they become uncontrolled, and they also need more energy, and more the energy, if it is not supplied, they're going to die. And once the starts growing and they become a tumor, if the tumor, the inside of the cells inside the tumor will become anorexic, and simply because they will not have oxygen supply. So unless there is vascularization and angiogenesis happens, those cells will not survive. And at the same time, whenever there is a DNA damage in a fast proliferating cells, the DNA damage induced cell cycle checkpoint will lead to apoptosis, what is called as programmed cell death. And invariably, each one of these steps are protecting our body from a cancer, which is a disease. Tumor is not necessarily a disease, right? So from tumor to cancer, there are 100 different steps which the cells have to cross before they can become cancerous. It's actually unfortunate that still large number of people are affected because of this disease. That means we have the number of events that are happening, right? Finally, it's all about probability, right? If you toss the coin 1 time, what is the probability that you get a tail or a head is half. But let's say if you challenge that, you toss the coin, what is continuously for a certain number of times, what is the probability that you get 100 times heads consecutively, right? So one can always calculate 1 half into that's 1 divided 1 by 2 to the power of 100. It's a very large number, right? But let's say if your number of attempts are so large that event, which is of low probability, can still happen. That's precisely what's happening in the context of cancer. The billions of cells are dividing all the time to repair our, node tissues, and to repair our injuries and kind of stuff. And these cells, which are there in our body, what are called stem cells, proliferative cells, they are the ones which are continuously dividing. And 1 or 2 cells something can go wrong. And as they grow, they start evolving. They go through almost like a Darwinian natural selection, and ultimately may become cancerous. Again, it's like in coronavirus, for example, if I get infection, doesn't mean that I may get the COVID disease. Similarly, if I may get some tumor, doesn't mean that I may get cancer as a disease. it again also has other factors which influence nutrition, lifestyle, geoclimatic event conditions. And so obviously the cancer is also a very complex problem. We cannot only look at through a molecular biology lens. In other example is the infectious disease. In fact, Dr. Mashekar has already pointed out that in addition to the way it spreads and very different biological factors, both the viral as well as the host human factors, which influences the spread as well as the disease, including the nutrition, lifestyle, and geoclimatic conditions. One most important aspect of problem dealing with infectious diseases, it influences the human behavior. And in return, the human behavior influences the dynamics of the epidemiological dynamics of the infectious diseases. So in a way, it becomes even more complex than cancer, right? Although both are multifactorial and in terms of how the problem gets manifested and how and even just trying to understand the problem and trying to find a solution, particularly during the crisis, it requires huge amount of effort from large number of scientists. And the quality of the data becomes extremely important here to understand the problem and trying to solve the problem. So these were what are known as mega science projects had to come out. Mega science projects are where large number of scientists come together, use variety of different types of tools. Each one would have certain kind of experts. Some may be in data, some may be in experimental, some may be in observational. And all of these people have to come together and work, and it has to be multi-location, particularly when it comes to disease like cancer or infectious diseases. You cannot study in Pune alone and say that I've understood all about the disease. It has to be multi-location too. Same thing with agriculture, for example, right? In plant breeding, you cannot say that I developed a new variety, it grows fantastic, and I have tried this in Pune, but that's not going to solve, prove that it's a good variety. It has to be tested in multiple different locations. So this is where the mega science becomes very, very important. And the modern ways, the mega science are becoming more and more, feasible because of our ability to share the data in real time and access to, data, right? So, but there are certain, sort of features of which basically make mega science successful. One is how meticulous your collection of data, because more the number of people involved in collecting the data, noisier it becomes, right? And collection of data from different contexts, and then how to connect to the context, because not necessarily the data is noisy, simply because data has been collected in a different context. So we need a good data sharing culture, policy, platform, right? And collation of all this data for meta-analysis requires, a completely different kind of a platform. It's an IT, problem, and variety of different new types of analytics like AI and ML have to be used. So you need to develop some new, analytical methods. So to achieve all of these things, we need certain human elements, that is cooperation, collaboration, and mutual respect and trust, right? And because, when large number of people are coming, and many times we don't know who these people are, right? I'll come to that as an example, both in the context of, particularly in the context of COVID, how even strangers, started collaborating with such good trust amongst each other. Pune is a city which is the perfect platform for launching mega science projects, right? And that's what I want to sort of highlight here. And Pune has all the elements of what I mentioned, how to sort of conceive and execute a mega science project. And Pune has almost all the elements that you want to start a mega science project. And actually, that's what has helped us. So in terms of cancer, very quickly, I'll mention in about 5 minutes about cancer problem. It's just an initiative, whereas the COVID is something where everybody would be more interested to know, and particularly because we are going through a pandemic. So the cancer has, all of us may say that I'm working on cancer, but I may be a basic scientist. I may use a cancer cell to understand simply certain aspect of cell division, certain aspect of internal dynamics of a cell, but not necessarily that I may actually try to do anything, trying to understand the cancer. That's sort of basic biology. Whereas in applied science, we try to look at what a new understanding that we have in basic biology, whether it's sort of fits very well to in cancer cells, right? And you try to look at in clinical samples whether it sort of holds good or not. So that becomes applied science. But to do what is known as translational research, that is to innovatively take the knowledge of basic and applied science to solve a real life problem. And that kind of a translational research requires a completely different bent of mind. This is where collaboration for a common goal has to come forward, and we have to share our expertise and resources. And of course, interdisciplinary approach is very important. Now, just to give a personal touch to this, as a developmental biologist, one of the topics that I was involved for the several years now is to understand the growth control during development. For example, why do our arms develop exactly the same size and always proportionate to our body, irrespective of what is the arm length of individual? Our arm length is proportional to body. That means a perfect growth control happens. How many times a cell divides? What is the number of cells in a given tissue, and what is the size of a cell? So that all of these things determine organ size and shape. And many genes that we studied in this context have something gone wrong in cancer. Obviously, it's very obvious. It's it's a commonsensical knowledge, because cancer is something where the growth control has gone wrong. So initially, my interest was to validate some of my discoveries in my basic biology lab to see whether similar kind of things is happening in cancer or not, particularly in epithelial cancer, right? And when I went to a clinician, particularly Dr. Kopikar of Prashanti Cancer Care Center, he runs a charity hospital, a fantastic doctor. He had lots of his own interesting questions, which are clinically relevant. Obviously, he would say, okay, yeah, you take some of these clinical samples, you want to do whatever you want. But he wouldn't get involved in a collaborative research, because those questions are not really of interest to him. And many times it may not be of certain common understanding because of the kind of language we use. Similarly, the kind of language he was using, kind of questions he was asking, so I may not have certain understanding of it. We took some time, because after several rounds of discussion, where we actually started looking at, there is a problem which he is working on. Many people have observed, but no one has actually looked at it in a very systematic way. There's a problem called TNBC problem in India, triple negative breast cancer. It's a high prevalence, more aggressive at a younger age group in India, and poor prognosis and so forth. And this requires a systematic review and meta-analysis of the problem. Large number of people have to come together. So if I say, if I want to work on my problem, doctor will not be that interested. If doctors, I may not be that interested. Somewhere we had to bridge and come together and address some problem, right? So these had decided that this is the problem. We'll address this. My or Isa Pune's biology department and his clinical research, we can actually combine and try to address this problem. So this is the beginning of trying to get into translational cancer research. We trying to set up a small center at that time, involving only 2 institutes, and then it started growing large. And Bajaj Auto gave a very generous seed grant. They've already now given the second grant for the phase 2 of this project. And looking at the problem is complex. There are so many elements involved in this. There is a basic biology research, there's clinical research, there is therapeutic related aspect to it. Not everything we can do it, but we need to collaborate with large number of people. So we moved on. So we started collaborating with many people. We started collaborating with clinicians, researchers, publication related one, patent related, policy makers, and particularly the people who are in the ethics. Whatever we do, it has to have a very high ethical standards, and we have to follow all regulatory guidelines. And we also had to do capacity building, because the number of people who are working in translational cancer research so few. We wanted to ensure that during the process, it's unlikely that in any one lifetime we would actually identify a problem and solve the problem, particularly as complex as cancer or infectious diseases. So it's a journey. As Dr. Mashekar said, science is all about truth. It's actually a journey towards that absolute truth. Similarly, it's a journey for us. So during this journey, we need to train more and more people, so that somewhere in future, there will be sufficiently large number of people to finally solve the problem. And that's one of the approaches that we took. And when we started collaborating with large number of people, both within Pune and outside Pune, including Bangladesh, which Arvind just mentioned, and then we started also discussing with, what other people have done outside India, particularly US. And we started collaborating with, the Cancer Genome Atlas people in the US. And after several rounds of discussion, large number of people in Pune, particularly Anand Deshpande of Persistent, and we thought, okay, why don't we set up one similar kind of a program in India, posed in Pune, that is Indian Cancer Genome Atlas. And it's a national initiative. It started in Pune, and it's a multi-omics approach to understand Indian cancers. But again, we start with the proof of concept in the beginning as phase 1. We'll take up the triple-negative breast cancer as a problem to address. And it has grown a lot. Started although from Pune. In Pune itself, it has Prashanti Cancer Care, ICER Pune, NCSR, NCL, NCCS, a persistent system, of course, and AFMC, Armed Forces Medical College, Symbiosis, KEM. They're all involved in this because they're also microbiome-related influence to the cancer. So we need to look at in multiple different ways. And we also have both national and international collaborations outside Pune too. And within a shorter reach of Pune, of course, we have Actric, which is just a 2-hour drive from here, and Tata Memorial Hospital in Mumbai. So I think we have grown, and it has become now an established association. And unfortunately, because of the pandemic that we are going through in the last 15 months, the actual progress, work progress, is somewhat less. But hopefully we'll catch up with time after this current pandemic sort of eases. With large number of people are already doing all the basic work, the preparatory work towards the generation of new data. And funding is also coming through. Bajaj has already given 1 round of funding. Persistent has given funding, and then we're also applying for very different grants. And thankfully, around the same time, we also have Genome India project, which launched by Department of Biotechnology, Government of India. And in Pune, is one of the major hubs. In fact, on entire Maharashtra population, we are supposed to represent. And obviously, we are not going to sequence all the people in Maharashtra, more than 10 crore people. Representative of that, based on the prior genetic information that we have, close to about 2,000 people, we are going to collect the samples, and then we're going to sequence their genome to understand the genomic and genetic diversity of Maharashtrian people. We're going to do it, of course, for the entire India with the help of other partners. And this consortium, Pune is a hub for the Maharashtra. And this data that we're going to generate from Genome India will actually be complementary to understand the cancer, and also will be complementary to understand the infectious diseases, particularly coming from the host factors. So Genome India project is very timely. If we had completed this by 2019, would have really helped a lot in addressing the COVID problem. But hopefully, in about a year's time, we'll have a good, baseline data on human genome in India. Particularly, as everybody knows, that India is just definitely is one nation, but it is within that one nation there are thousands of small nations, and because based on the population structure in the country. Okay, so I'll move on to, in another 10-15 minutes, so I'll sort of touch upon how Pune is addressing the coronavirus problem, right? And I don't have to sort of give any kind of introduction on coronavirus, whether someone is with a science background or not science background, and it's all flooded with information about coronavirus, right? But this is where already Dr. Mashelkar touched upon this. So I'll just give you a sort of brief one. Science actually was never done in practice in isolation. Where you are talking about, early, thinkers from India, or Greek philosophers, or Greek experimental scientists, who actually experimental science started in Greece, Pythagorean time, and it was always in collaborative mode. It's simply that the mobility of people was so limited, the collaboration was not direct, it was more indirect. Knowledge was always continuously shared as soon as it is produced. But initially it was through oral communication with the help of merchant and travelers. Then post Gutenberg revolution, the book which conveyed the text as well as the images, because images are very important to carry the knowledge than the text, because text can create more kind of a misunderstanding, but images are very important. That's why Gutenberg revolution actually helped in spreading of knowledge much better compared to the earlier 2000 years. Now with digital, we have instantaneous communication through text, images, audio, video, and etc. So this basically enables cooperation, of course, collaboration, national, international, sharing, peer review, external validation. Everything happens so fast. So science has become now a very global. There is nothing like national science or international science. Science is just science. It's basically for the entire humanity, right? Now, just look at the COVID time. December 2019, it was announced that Wuhan in China, there was some rare disease caused an influenza-like disease, but it was not influenza. And within days, people found out which virus, how it enters the body, which protein of human cells is the receptor for the entry of the virus, and what is the nature of the disease. Infection is one and the disease is the other one, and how it spreads from people to people, right? All of these knowledge were generated within weeks and shared immediately with the rest of the world in real time. So even before the virus entered India, we already knew that we had to wear masks, we had to maintain some social distance, or physical distancing. We had to keep washing hands with soap water, or use sanitizers, and all of these things were already in place even before the virus started spreading in India. That's the what science can do, and by cooperation and collaboration, it can have a compounded benefit to the whole humanity. Now, within 12 months, almost many of you in the audience may have already been vaccinated. We have the vaccines, and there are many drugs, and more drugs are in the pipeline, more vaccines are in the pipeline, and we have much better understanding of the virus and disease. And so, of course, new aspect of the disease is also being explored. Now, another advantage now is because of the collaboration and cooperation, because it's a virus which mutates much faster. It's being an RNA virus, and new variants are being evolved almost regularly in different pockets of the world, and more so in India because of the large population. And now we are going through a massive second wave, and these are all being tracked at an early stage, so that we can actually plan ahead. What if this virus is resistant to vaccine? What if this virus is resistant to certain kinds of drugs? What if it causes a different symptom which is not known to the doctors before? So all these kind of studies are going on, and that's what science has been able to help. So without getting into the details of the virus and how we want to deal with the virus, because I'm not an epidemiologist, not a medical researcher or infectious disease specialist, but I thought to see how Pune as a society, I'm not going to say scientist, as a society has actually responded to this. A lot of things is also because of the preparedness, right? Now, if many times we think that, why scientists couldn't respond, but you need a certain kinds of infrastructure, you need certain kinds of, critical mass of expertise, you want to respond. Just one scientist, in one large city, like Mumbai or Pune, will not be able to address all the problem where science is required, right? So this is where the Pune had all the necessary elements in place. For example, the NCL Venture Center, just as an example, there are many contributors to this problem from the society, Pune society. But look at, my lab is the first one to produce an Indian RT-PCR kit for diagnosis. My lab has just come out with a self-test for COVID. My lab is an incubatee in NCL Venture Center. You can ask the question, because this is what we always talk in historical perspective. What if question? Everybody asks what if question in our life. What if, right? In personal life, in our professional life, or even national history. What if, let's say, 200 years ago, British were not here? What if India had independence 100 years earlier rather than 75 years? You can always ask hundreds of questions. There are certain you can always answer. For example, the Gandhian peace movement, we can always give a cause and effect relationship, because the way we won the independence using the peaceful way, the conflict resolution in India is largely using a peaceful movement rather than violent, armed struggle. That what we see in many other countries, even as an independent nation, right? So similarly, Pune had certain necessary ingredients which actually helped, an innovative company such as MyLab to emerge from the city, which is not only helped, of course, the Pune and it's helping the entire nation. And we should not only look at from Pune perspective right now. Serum Institute, all of you know, it's much more known to the whole world. Many of us knew Serum Institute. We knew many of the scientists working in Serum Institute being biologists. But its presence in Pune, it's sort of natural considering the kind of infrastructures, kind of expertise, kind of organization, both academic and industry we have, and just sort of naturally, got integrated into the Pune ecosystem. And now Serum Institute is a savior of a large, proportion of Indian population, and also outside once, more and more vaccines are exported. Now, the other, I'll just use Pune as an example. There are many other contributors too. Please, don't think that I'm trying to promote only Pune here. So adaptability. One of the things which scientists have to always look at is whenever there is a crisis, they should adapt themselves and change their priorities and then try to solve the problem. For example, the COVID diagnosis, which is RT-PCR, which is what we do normally in every day, whether you're a microbiologist or a plant biologist or animal biologist or a human clinical biologist, the RT-PCR is something which we always do, because finally it's all down to chemistry. The life is all down to chemistry. DNA is simply a chemical molecule. How DNA replication happens in a test tube and how you can amplify it. And all of this is basically a chemical reaction happening in a test tube. Normally what happens in a biological system, what we call biochemical reactions, you can do it as a chemical reaction in a test tube. In fact, almost all the major techniques related to molecular biology are developed by chemists, bioorganic chemists. So IISER Pune very quickly, set up a testing center. It was one of the early testing centers in the country where, currently it is being, run with under the leadership of a plant biologist. Nothing to do. He has never worked on infectious disease in his life. But finally, it's molecular biology. How you can actually understand the molecular basis of diagnostic and how you can apply your knowledge to solve a problem. This is a nice example. So around the time when COVID pandemic broke out, Pune Knowledge Cluster was established by Government of India through the Office of Principal Scientific Advisor. Idea is to build up, set up a platform, bring all the talent that is available and all the resources that are available in the city from industry, academia, government and non-governmental organization to come together and address, a problem, right? It could be air, water, health, and so forth. So Pune Knowledge Cluster as a platform brought together a large number of people, both from industry and academia, and formed what is known as a COVID expert group. And we collaborated very closely with Pune Municipal Corporation and collected data from very disaggregated different ones. And the data was cleaned, collated, curated, and started doing analysis, and also set up a couple of dashboards to visualize the data so that any public can actually understand what's happening in the Pune city. And if they have, many times a restaurant owner may be interested to know how what is the dynamics of the epidemiology, and they can actually predict whether the government is going to extend the lockdown by another 2 weeks or they're going to lift the lockdown. Depends on how the curve is looking. So now everybody is interested to visualize the COVID epidemiology, right? And that's something which the Pune Knowledge Cluster took it on itself to provide a platform for general public as well as policymakers to visualize the dynamics of the pandemic in Pune city. And they also started doing certain kinds of forecast. And the forecast of as you all know, the second wave, none of us could predict the mass. Of course, second wave was sort of coming was known, but not to this scale. No one could sort of see the surge like this. Of course, one could have, perhaps maybe we were not that competent at least. But what some of the experts involved in this data analysis were doing was at least predict what could be the ICU requirement, ICU bed requirement in the coming 2 weeks. It's like monsoon prediction. At least 2 weeks in advance, if you can predict, it will be good enough. In 2 weeks in advance, if you tell them you may need 100 more ICU beds, at least the PMC can actually work towards that. That's the kind of prediction we started making. And of course, we did some kind of a forecasting. In the beginning, it worked out very well. And as you could make out, the dotted lines is the actual data, and the box in which the one maroon line and the green line is the prediction or the forecasting. So the dotted line is always within that area, suggesting that the forecasting was somewhat accurate. But more than the forecast, in the real time, what are the challenges we had? And we could actually use the knowledge that was available in Pune and do data analysis in team. For example, when if you look at the Pune, you should not look at the Pune as average. We keep saying that national average has no meaning when it comes to COVID. We have to look at every district independently. Now in the Pune, which is a 5 million people, Pune Municipal Corporation area is 5 million, PCMC is another 2 billion and so forth. You had to divide them into smaller grids. So each grid we started looking at wards or prabhas and started seeing that perhaps we had to look at how to reduce the test positivity and also reduce the CFR, the case fatality rate. So that's the only way saying that you have somehow reached towards addressing the problem by lowering the infection rate, right? So rather than simply looking at how many cases per day from different parts, we started looking at in a completely different way. And this kind of visualization also helps that which ward people had to focus. For example, at a time when we were, showed this visualization, Dole Patil Road or Bhawanipet area, which are high test positivity as well as high CFR. This is very dangerous, in those areas, which there should be more focus in those areas by the municipal corporation, and that indeed they did give more focus into those areas. I'll skip now because of the lack of time. So a lot of other clinical analysis also being done, and not all of them have been immediately useful for addressing the problem. Perhaps it will be useful in the coming months as well as in the larger public health related issues when we deal with not only during the pandemic and post-pandemic. The impact of this pandemic is going to be on us for the next 2 to 3 years. So all of these analysis will be useful, if not today, in the coming months. Pune Digital Twin, TCS people along with Prayas and group, they developed a Pune Digital Twin, and they did a lot of simulation to see how infection may be spreading in different contexts, and then trying to sort of bring these simulations to the Pune officials and say that they can actually use these simulations for policy making, particularly putting some restrictions. We also did the Serum survey, one of the better planned Serum survey in the city, because we had access to the granular epidemiological data. Because most Serum survey was simply randomly picking up some samples, we actually correlated to the testing data. And we also had some understanding of the population level immunological diversity, although we didn't have a complete understanding of the population so much, but we could actually see some diversity in the immune response to infection, which is also very important because there would be diversity in immune response to vaccination, because the natural infection or vaccine-induced immunity in a given individual, there will be a different dynamics, but more or less qualitatively the same. So why there is some diversity, why there is some people are better protected, some people are not so well protected. These studies will help for better vaccination and for further care. I think I'll stop this. There is a wave that's going on, but I thought just one last slide. I'm not don't want to claim that Pune we prevented the second wave or did extremely well. Of course, we are going through a surge. Large number of people have died. Second surge is massive compared to the first one. But there are certain elements in small improvement, particularly in the case of case fatality. The second surge is far less than in the first wave, and although it's not true in other cities, right? Pune and Mumbai are the only two cities where the case fatality in the second surge is far, far less than the first one. There are two, of course, better preparedness at the hospital, infrastructure, oxygen supply. At the same time, a data-driven approach to understand the problem and be prepared to save lives. And if PMC authorities, it's a natural calamity. Many times we can always say that, what could have done, right, in such a pandemic situation. But what I could confidently say in Pune, right, irrespective of how many people are infected, how many people suffered with the disease, how many people succumbed to the disease, the coordination, cooperation, and the science-driven approach by the Pune municipal, not only municipal corporation, all the authorities of Pune, all the scientists, industries, particularly Maharashtra Chamber of Commerce and Maratha Chamber of Commerce, all of these coming together, responding to the problem, definitely has saved lives. There are data which can support this, and is what achievement, right? And saving lives, finally, even 1 life, 2 lives, 100 lives, every life is so important, and saving lives is with the help of science is one of the achievements of Pune. And of course, Pune is contributing to the whole country through diagnostic kits as well as the vaccine. We have many other work coming up. We are now going to do a major genome surveillance. It's already began in NCL and ISF Pune, and in collaboration with many hospitals. We're also doing understanding how people are responding to vaccination, and that's also very important because this vaccination we need to continue for at least 1 or 2 years. Now, today's children will be ready for vaccination next year. Before they are vaccinated, we should have a clear understanding of how vaccines are protecting, what are the dynamics of the immune system in response to vaccination, so that tomorrow's children are better protected. Of course, a long term is to make Pune better prepared for any health crisis. We need a very good epidemiological database, which we're going to start. A large number of people have contributed from a variety of different organizations and industry, academia, and NGOs. Pune, of course, city officials, and the list is much longer for anybody to read. But I just thought I'll display. And thank you very much. I'll stop here. Sorry, I took longer than I thought.
So, thank you, Professor Shashidhara. Knowing you and your work to deal with the societal challenges. So what we learned today or heard today is just a glimpse of what you are trying to do. This is a glimpse and introduction for us common citizens of this city and nation. So I have some leading questions. Of course, there are some questions in Q&A chat. So let me start with the first question, which is linked to your closing aspect. During the closing, you said how Pune has been able to respond to the COVID particular second wave. So, in the media, there is a discussion about the Pune paradox. It's a very interesting term that was coined, particularly for the city of Pune while dealing with COVID. The reason is that Pune has seen both best and worst. For example, we have Serum Institute, which is it's the largest manufacturing of vaccines. We have most advanced virology institute and lab in Pune. And of course, there are many other scientific institutions in Pune. We have startups like MyLab, who were the first in India to develop COVID detection kit. And recently, what you said is a self-help diagnostic kit based on anti-reagents. So that is one part of the story, which is the best part of Pune in this pandemic. The second part is, Pune was the first city in Maharashtra to report COVID. And then, of course, the kind of an impact Pune has seen in the first wave and second wave, though our mortality rates are far, far better. So now here is my question to you, and get your views and thoughts. Would you think, Professor Shashidhara, in the third wave, which is expected to come in say another 6 months, would Pune break this paradox and say that Pune is the city that is first in India to deal effectively the third wave of COVID?
Okay, so to answer your question very briefly, Arvind, Pune paradox has multiple things, right? It's nothing to do with, various things. We still do not have a clear understanding. When H1N1 outbreak happened, Pune was the only city which was affected in those days, right? Then it slowly spread in smaller number in Bangalore and other cities. But Pune is the only one which had a lockdown for 1 month, I remember. Now, if we look at the current one also, Pune has, one of the badly affected or worse affected is considering the population size. Mumbai and Delhi may be more in number, but amongst the cities per million population, I think Pune is one of the worst. So this is something which is not studied. It actually requires two aspects. One is epidemiological study, another is the social factors, right? And people, I think this is Pune is really a good case study to study this. It will be immensely useful for the whole country, perhaps for the whole world. I think in the end of the first wave, many of us were discussing why is Pune is like this, right? And the second wave too, it hit so badly. We were thinking that Pune had so many cases, and it had an umbrella-like curve. It was not like a bell-shaped curve. Correct. And so we thought that perhaps Pune is more or less covered, right? Pune population, and so hopefully we'll not have a very severe second wave. But it's completely all of us were disproved. Looking at I think there is something which you are not understood. That's basically honest answer is we don't know. I think it's an important question to be addressed using expertise from both social sciences and natural sciences, and of course data science people. And this collecting data is very important. And thankfully, and I can vouch that there may be disaggregation of data which we need to collect from different sources. Pune data is really, really very, very good and enormous, and both the testing data or positive case-wise data or clinical data, also the mortality data. I think that's very important for future analysis. Regarding the third wave question, my feeling is second wave has hit so badly the whole country. We all have learned a lesson. Yes. And whether it's oxygen or ICU beds or oxygen concentrators. I think the third wave, unless it's because of a completely different mutant virus, if it is, if the same level of, protection, our current first wave or the current infection or all the vaccine that we have are giving, third wave will not have been, so impactful. I think we'll not lose lives for sure. The third wave.
And thank you for this response, honest response. You said, about the data and data-driven efforts, and particularly Pune, I would say that leading in this data collection, data curation, analysis, and also prediction, which is really, really good. And data, Professor Shashidhara, is common to both this pandemic as well as your efforts in cancer, which is also about data. Yeah. And I was just reading that in Nature says that data sharing today enables new science tomorrow. That's true. So what has been your experience today about data sharing? Because data curation and prediction can be done. As a scientist, we can do this. But what has been your, say, experience, or what kind of challenges that you are facing in terms of getting that right kind of data between the institution, between the labs, and of course, from the citizens or from the municipal corporations?
Okay, so, I think data sharing, people are more and more open for this compared to earlier decade. Okay. I started my career, just the time when the internet started. And, during my PhD, of course, even there were no emails, and slowly, emails and other things started. And we could make out that, currently in the last 2-3 years, we know that almost everybody is open to share data because the amount of data we are generating is so much. No one is being able to understand the data themselves. They won't be able to get a complete benefit out of what data they have. So they want to collaborate with data scientists, whether it's a molecular biologist or a cell biologist or an infectious disease person. They all want a data scientist among themselves because there's so much data generating. It's almost impossible for any one particular person to understand derive all the benefits of having such data. So people are now across the world, not just within India collaboration, across the world. There are certain kinds of data, there are certain limitations in data sharing, but those barriers are also removed. For example, now the genome sequencing that we are doing, viral genome sequencing, although there may be a delay, but ultimately the data is being shared across the world through a platform, and all the new variants are being looked at. For example, we may say that we have identified this variant, the same genome, someone else said there's one more variant, you're not seeing this. The way, for example, when Chandrayana went, we had analyzed the data ourselves, and then US, NASA people say that, no, there's some interesting data you're not looked at, there's maybe a water, in moon. So the data sharing, I think, helps. Finally, the world, is the entire humanity is the one which is going to benefit from this.
So this is also a question that is being asked by the participants. Mr. Swaminathan says that how important data is, particularly the quality of data, and then how do we rate your experience? That's what you shared right now. There is a very interesting question that Mr. Arihant Singh is asking. So I have more questions, but I thought let me take some questions from the participants. Yeah, of course, he says it's a great presentation, sir. If we could have predicted the damage by virus, which many of us already, of course, there was some kind of a prediction. Why not a central system for science community in India take lead and accommodate all scientists in one umbrella and solve and face every hurdle as a team? So what is still stopping us to come together? I think let me just bring the connotation. What is when I talk to many scientists and some good researchers, one thing that is coming out very strongly is how, as a researcher, can contribute to such mission-driven projects in general. So your thoughts, please.
Okay. So I mean, let me take COVID as an example, right? How all of us can come together. Now, the one is the data collection at the collection level. It should be really honest, and we should collect, and it should be collated in an appropriate way so that anybody can analyze using different tools, so that each one will get some insight into what's happening, and then of course will be a collective understanding of the epidemiology and the disease and the mortality and so forth. When you look at anecdotally again, not necessarily using the data, a doctor in New York, but after Wuhan thing happened, many people died in Wuhan. Many people died in Italy, many people died in Spain, France. Then the virus entered the east coast of US, and many people started dying in New York City. One doctor noticed that perhaps the cause of the death is not because the virus is spoiling all the cells. It is our own immune response violently reacting to it, what is known as cytokine storm, and IL-6 levels are going up. So if you give IL-6 inhibitor, perhaps you can save lives. Until then, everybody was being sent to ventilators rather than trying to do any other measures. So as soon as the IL-6 thing was discovered and immediately communicated to the world, people could actually save lives, right? So, but Dr. Mashekar in the beginning itself mentioned, I also in my slide had, when it comes to infectious diseases, there are two aspects to it. Scientists trying to understand and make predictions. The second one is our understanding of the disease may change the human behavior, and then it also influences the pandemic, right? So if you look at the dynamics of this epidemiology, is not only based on the data, is not only based on our understanding of the disease, it also depends on the human behavior. We have seen it again and again, how things have gone wrong, particularly the second surge, is simply because of our own behavior, letting ourselves down, letting our guards down. So communication the most important of the data science modern day is also communicating to general public in a way they understand, they take care of this, and also to the policymakers that what is important, when there is no surge, what is that they need to do rather than completely, of course, everybody knew that this virus is not going to go away from Earth. There's nothing like, beating the virus, right? We had to finally, at some point, everybody is saying that we will live with the virus because there will be a natural selection where, there will be a balance between the host and the virus. But, the most important aspect of it is, it's true that all scientists have to come together. It has come. It has given an opportunity, and people have come together: mathematicians, physicists, biologists, immunologists, epidemiologists, and all. So one of the shortcoming in Indian context is we have very few epidemiologists. We have very good epidemiologists, so world's best epidemiologists. At the same time, number is very small. And in infectious diseases, every city, every district has to be looked at differently. So one epidemiologist, or let's say 10 or 15, the world's best epidemiologists in the country, cannot look at all the data all the time. That's one of the shortcomings of India. We need very, very large number of epidemiologists in this country.
But Professor Shashidhara, you are right. But very interesting observation that we see, and even Dr. Mushakar says, that there is a shift in the way science is being done today in India, of course, globally, but today in India. So we are now talking about collaboration, co-creation, partnerships, and so on, which perhaps was very less or limited in India. Do you see this is going to really make a shift in Indian science in future, which will live for a longer?
It's true. It's already the policy level funding agencies are also now promoting more collaborative research, more interdisciplinary research. And so post-COVID, I'm sure more and more people will realize that collaboration is better than working in silos, in isolation. And hopefully there will be a positive change.
Yes. And there are two questions that I would like to take from the Q&A, Q&A chat box from the participant. So Mr. Satish Pradhan says, does black fungus represent a discontinuity in the adaptive or evolving journey of a virus?
The black fungus is nothing to do with the virus, right? It's just one of the side, sort of effects of part of this COVID problem, right? So I have an infection, viral infection. My immunity is already low, and I'm going through oxygen therapy. I'm going through very different types of other, treatments. At the same time, if I'm also diabetic, I have very high levels of sugar. It gives the best, condition for a fungus to grow. That's all. So it's nothing to do with directly with the virus. So black fungus was happening earlier too.
Yes,
at a smaller scale, with nothing to do with the virus directly.
Absolutely. And there is a question from Dr. Aditya Bhan. He says, how have lockdown impacted coronavirus mutation in Pune and more generally in India? Has lockdown impacted the mutations?
So this is very obvious now. Everybody is talking about the lockdown. Lockdown was meant to see when the second surge, what happened in Delhi. Thankfully, it didn't happen in Pune because Pune was better prepared in terms of oxygen supply, and also there was a very quick response by the what called Mission Vayu by Maratha Chamber of Commerce, brought in large number of concentrators and oxygen cylinders and also new oxygen generators and spread across the district. But what happened in Delhi, when there is a sudden surge, irrespective of how much you're prepared, how many oxygen plants or other things you have, there will be a shortcoming. So the importance in epidemiology is to prevent such surges, right? Because you cannot cope with play in a city of 20 million people. Now, in the context of the Pune, if you look at what was the specific question that was this one?
So he said, how have lockdowns impacted?
Oh, lockdown, yeah. So the lockdown is actually meant to restrict the movement of the virus such a way that it's manageable, number one. So you'll also get some breathing time to prepare yourself in case there's a surge. So lockdown has always helped that way. For example, our first wave was manageable with hindsight, of course, because when people lose their lives, their families, there's nothing we have managed, right? Even today, if someone is, dead in my family, the whole world has, has failed me because it's simply because I have lost someone in my own life, right? In my own family. So, but still, in the Pune context, the first way with hindsight to look at it, better managed, is simply because the lockdown helped you to prepare better. I have directly seen how the officials used to work and all the NGOs used to work, and to keep the Pune safer during the lockdown and the post-lockdown. In second wave also, I think our experience of the first wave helped to prepare better in the second wave, although surge was much larger than the first one. So lockdown only helps to that extent. The virus is not going to go away just with the lockdown. Finally, it's the immunization, what going to, like the way smallpox was completely eradicated, or polio is almost eradicated. And until then, we had to live with the virus. But with case of influenza virus, it's maybe difficult to eradicate completely because it mutates so fast. But lockdown is only a sort of a temporary, we get some kind of a respite from the spread to be better prepared from the surge.
So there is another, of course, there is one question on science diplomacy. We will take it perhaps later, but there is a very interesting question by Ghulam Mehndi Dar. So he says, she says, first of all, wonderful session by Professor Shashidhara. For me, sir, in scientific emotion and inspiration. So compliments, thank you for these compliments. So the question is, if the perception that SARS-CoV-2 does integrate into human genome, what would be the impact on human developmental biology?
Okay, so there are many infections which affect the early development, pediatric development in the postnatal, also prenatal, right? But SARS-CoV-2 is not known to affect the development. Although there is now cases at early, for pediatric infections, young kids at 5-year age group also getting infected. We do not know yet to what extent, but most infectious diseases, if they are treated early and because of immune system, it functions very well, and it may not have a long imprint, particularly among the children, because they have regeneration capacity also pretty high. But if you look at the older people, when they get infected and if they go through a lung damage, there won't be any more repair of this lung at an older age. There'll be a long-term impact of the disease for those people. There'll be breathlessness continuously. They have to be careful throughout their life. But children, even for example, leukemia, if it comes to older people, it's very, very, very severe. Younger people, if you treat them well early by detecting that, their recovery is really, really good, because the stem cells regeneration capability is so good, and same thing with the immune system in a growing child, because the evolution, really, we are all evolved to have healthy life until we procreate, right? Post our generation, for example, the young ones are already born and taken care of, basically 40 and above. When we start aging, the so-called decline starts in the body, physiological decline. So infection after 40, when there is physiological decline of our body, it will have more damage than younger people. Of course, this is general. Of course, there are individuals who sometimes may be sensitive, and we have seen younger people succumb to the disease. It's not an absolute, it's a generalization rather than absolute saying that yes or no.
So, of course, there are more questions, Professor Shashidhara. I don't know which one, because we have only 2 minutes. Then, of course, we would like to hear from Dr. Mashelkar, his closing remarks. But quickly, if you want to make any remark on about India's science diplomacy, of course, that question doesn't explain what that diplomacy is all about. But is there any your thoughts and response to that?
Sure. I'll tell you what. We have very good biologists, epidemiologists, virologists, and vaccinologists. We have Serum Institute, and we also have very good R&D in pharmaceuticals. Cipla, Reddy's, and so forth, right? And all of us work together on this, in a pandemic. Look at from a variety of different angles, right? One advantage is India is a country which is the most diverse, in the human population. We have genetic diversity, lifestyle diversity, geoclimatic diversity, and nutrition diversity. And if whatever the result that we generate from India during this pandemic, if it is done in collaboration, openly with both the international and national collaboration, and share the data, it will be immensely useful for the whole humanity, right? If you look at today, the triple negative breast cancer question, right? What we know about that cancer, how you to diagnose, how to treat, is based on what people have done in US. And we also know that not only for this, most other diseases also, it's not applicable to many times to Indian population. It's simply because our disease manifestation is different than in the US, right? Caucasian population have a different disease manifestation than India. So tomorrow, the infectious diseases can manifest itself in so many different ways based on so many factors. India can be actually a good place to study all of these things, share, and then that is a good science diplomacy, I would say. Of course, we have vaccine diplomacy, we have other pharmaceutical diplomacy also, which is also should continue, and we should help. But science diplomacy is where we can actually contribute to generating new knowledge. I'll stop here. Thank you very much.
Arvind?
Yes.
It's not necessary to spend time on listening to me. Very important to listen to Shashi. There are many interesting questions. Sahib has asked a particular question. Then there is a question about, does vaccination increase mutation rate? There's a question about the origin of COVID-19 and so on. More specific, not the general ones, but more specific. And many of them might have come from very young people. All right. So what I'll do, I'll not take more than 30 seconds. Give all that time for Shashi to answer some of these questions, but more specific ones, not general ones.
Yes. So I know one very young student who is an undergrad student of biology, first year in biology in Bangalore. He's asking a question, now young student asking, if the virus genetically variate further and the nature selects it, how can you anticipate that current vaccination and health structure will be able to defend it? This is the young student.
Okay, it's very simple, right? It's a lock and key type, right? You have a lock, for example, and you want to know which key will go and open the lock, right? There are maybe, let's say, 3 or 4 variants of a key because of minor changes in the teeth of the key. It's okay to match, and you can still open the lock. So virus cannot enter human cells without going through a receptor, what is called, in this particular context, there's a protein called ACE2. It has to bind to that receptor and then enter the cell. Okay. And unless it enters the cell, it cannot replicate, because virus is, on its own, it's basically a dead, right? It's not non-living. It's just an RNA molecule coated with protein. Unless it goes inside the cell, it cannot copy itself. And during the copying mechanism, it uses so much of our own energy, the cells die, our cells die. That's what the disease are. So you can actually find out what are the different variants can still enable it to go inside the cell and replicate. What are the variants which will not even able to even go inside, right? So that's how all the vaccines, for example, if you look at the Pfizer, Moderna, and AstraZeneca, these are the vaccines people are talking about. Irrespective of the variants, particularly in the protein, which basically is supposed to bind to the human receptor and enter the cell, the vaccine will this one. But there's still, there are some unknowns about the virus. So that's what people want to sequence the genome. What are the different mutations in the other genes other than the so-called spike protein, which may change its behavior, right? And that's what is now looking at. That's why viral genome sequencing is extremely important, because you need to understand all variants, right? And because of fermentation and combination, right? And we have given that platform because every human, there are millions of these viruses, and that's where we should be able to identify new variants. But it's unlikely that there would be a virus which will completely escape immune vaccine-induced immunity, but still be able to survive and replicate, because that virus will not be able to even go inside human cell. So obviously those variants of no use for us, of any particular relevance to us.
So thank you. And here is another, of course, lots of questions. I'm just picking up some random questions, a little bit different questions that I thought, I should ask. This is the question that is asked by Anjali Naik, and she says that will any kind of a research project with respect to immunoprotective herbal drugs as adjuvant in COVID treatment be undertaken in near future in Pune knowledge cluster, for example? So what is your opinion on usage of traditional herbal medicine? This is slightly a little bit different.
No, it's okay. I mean, there are many. I mean, I'm personally, I have not come across any such study. Earlier, Bhushan Patwardhan used to do many of those studies. I don't know if any such studies are going on for this particular virus. Bhushan Patwardhan has been doing for many other diseases, including diabetes and cancer. But I don't know if anybody in Pune has taken up. But there are multiple places such studies are going on where, because finally you want to improve our immune response to infection. There may be many modulators, immune modulators. Some of them may be of herbal medicine origin, but I have not come across any personally. Because during this pandemic, everybody wants to do as quickly and as effective as possible. One of the problems with herbal medicine, which we know, is unless you know what is the active ingredient, unless we know how much is the concentration active ingredient which is effective for being a immune modulator, it's very difficult to use it. So if you give this as a medicine, if it's only effective for 10 people out of, let's say, 1 million, you wouldn't know which 10 of the 1 million would be useful. So finally, it will not be effective. That's one of the reasons in the race to develop treatment to an ongoing pandemic caused by an infectious virus. We need to be a little bit more proactive in looking for an active ingredient. So generally, the synthetic chemistry and organic chemistry will provide such molecules rather than herbal medicine.
I see. Thank you. So I will take this last question, and it's a long question. It's about data accuracy, which you have already addressed. But the question at the end says, can we say that medical science is still in an evolving stage when it comes to getting the right treatment for COVID-19? Because we started with plasma, got into steroids and many other options. So
it definitely it's evolving. There's no doubt about it. Even when some of these therapies were prescribed, hydroxychloroquine or today the plasma therapy the last year, now it's also out of the list. The WHO is already saying that don't go for many of the so-called proven drugs. The reason is there are two aspects to this. One is the clinical management of the infection. Second is at the larger scale, how to prove that it is very efficient. So it's a long range, like a vaccine, right? Everybody knows that a good vaccine takes 5 to 6 years to develop, unless you looked at it in a variety of different ways. But we don't have the luxury of time during a pandemic. So that's why these vaccines were approved on emergency use basis, with a clear understanding that this vaccine today given doesn't mean that the rest of our life we are protected from the virus. We need to be continuously monitoring the vaccinated people. We need to be continuously cautious about wearing masks and other things, so that we don't know what may happen. Because we have not studied the drug or vaccines or any of these things sufficiently in all contexts to say that it is safe and effective both, right? Of course, safety is easier to analyze, but effectiveness, it takes years, right? So we don't have that luxury of time. So nothing wrong in prescribing certain types of drugs, and also it's also equally good, honestly. What scientists and clinicians do is, no, what we initially tried was wrong. Perhaps we should withdraw this, because plasma therapy is one best example. It is also influenced by a variety of different factors. Unless you have a clear parameters on which parameters you have to use, say that this particular plasma is good for therapy and this plasma we should not use. In the absence of all those metrics, so people overuse this. It's almost like our antibiotics. So use and abuse of plasma therapy may lead to new viral variants, selection of new viral variants. So that's why they withdrew this. It's good that they withdrew it before it's too late.
Maybe last question. So very specific, maybe very quick response, Professor Shashidhara, is about does vaccination increase the mutation rate, and how? Is there does vaccination increase mutation rate?
No.
Okay. So, so I know it is already, 6:30. We are touching to 6:29. Only 1 minute left, and I can say that there was overwhelming response. We touched almost 170 plus participants. Maybe a first time we have done reached that particular number. Thank you very much for sharing your deep experience, insights, and possible of using science and science tools to solve the societal problem. So without much further thoughts, I request Dr. Mashekar to make his closing remarks, please.
Yes, thank you very much. The success of any webinar is not so much determined by the number of attendees, but the number of questions.
Of course.
Because if you, there is fundamentally what is called jnana, curiosity. And if it has touched your brain and you are asking questions, that's fantastic. That has got an impact. So I use very different criteria in terms of, so I'm very happy that there was such an interest, such an enthusiasm. I know still there are large number of questions which are not being sort of answered. If it's okay with Shashi, you can get the email IDs of those people who asked and bound them up to Shashi. I know Shashi is generous vis-a-vis this, and we should do that. Only 2-3 comments I will make very quick. One is that Shashi, I knew you as a great scientist, science leader. Today it has been shown what a great communicator you are, and also your philosophical bent. The way you related to sort of the universe and sort of the general principles was phenomenal. I'm very happy that you mentioned about humility. I think scientists have to be humble because there is nothing like a ultimate truth. We have to keep on discovering the truth. All that I would say is that for discovering the truth, society must also help. Because you can see the kind of veracity of data. I mean, there are reports that are coming up where death certificates have been 20 times more than the reported deaths.
Yeah.
So maybe some of them were natural deaths, say 50% of them, but still it is 10 times more. And what would your model do if the data are wrong in terms of mortality? Yes. What will we be able to predict? So I think the responsibility is also on us, on the society. That's why I said it is not only the behavior of the virus, but the behavior of the people. And by people, I mean whole range of things. As a matter of fact, I think the two will have to go together. This has been a fantastic, event. I myself learned such a lot. So really, really grateful to you. Thank you, Shashi.
Thank you. Thanks for this opportunity. Thank you very much. Really, I'm honored.
Thank you, Professor Shashidhara, for a very excellent talk. And as Dr. Arvind was saying, we had a very good attendance for the talk and also extremely good questions. So let me thank you on behalf of PIC for this particular talk.
Please do send all the questions to me by email and try to answer.
Sure, we'll do that. Thanks to Dr. Mashekar sir for chairing this particular session with a very good summarizing of the entire talk. You had a very nice summary at the end and also started the session so very well. So thank you, sir, for your presence here and also for chairing the session. Dr. Arvind, thank you for moderating the event. I also thank all the panelists here, Dr. Vijay Kedkar sir, Mr. Abhay Vaidya, for being on the panel and for gracing this particular occasion. Last but not the least, thank you all the attendees for attending the talk and also taking keen interest and having so many good questions for the speaker. So on behalf of PIC, let me thank everybody. Before we end this particular session, let me just quickly remind everybody that there is an upcoming event which is on 27th May, that is on Thursday. This is PIC Conversation, which is coming up, and the title is Transforming India's Economy, Lessons from Global Experiences. This will be given by Dr. Ajay Chibbar, and Dr. Narendra Jadhav will be chairing this particular session. This is on 27th May at 6:30 p.m. India time. So finally, let me thank everybody for this session and goodbye. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Mr. Shashidhara, thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Yeah.
Thank you, Arvind.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Sangeeta.